Welcome to the True Crime Cafe. I'm Angie.
I'm Becky, and you won't believe the case I have for you today. This week's case is one I'm calling Murder at Sea. And I know it's not very original, but I'm still a little off my game from my very first ocean voyage, which took place a week ago today. And if anyone saw the Facebook post, there was a little hint of what happened, that someone got seasick and they were on the front of the boat, and apologies to everyone behind them on the boat. That was me. I was seasick. I cannot lose sight of land, apparently. I can only be on a boat as long as I can see land.
That's
I did not know that was a thing. Yeah. So mom and her boyfriend visiting. We had so much fun. We went to dinner one night without any of our adult kids.
Nice.
My kids took her to the beach one day so I could get caught up on some work.
Nice.
We had just me and mom shopping day. We got, where did we go? We went to Krispy Kreme. We got coffee and donuts, and we saw alligators in the wild.
Nice.
Unlike our very first episode, everybody returned home with all the limbs we had when we left the house.
Right.
Yeah. The big adventure was a 2-hour dolphin watching excursion. It went 25 miles out to sea.
Okay.
The water was choppy. They're like, oh no, this is just a little choppy. You just need your sea legs. I just need to get back on land.
Right. Dramamine.
Yeah. Next time, there won't be a next time, but if I ever go back in time, I will. Because I'm not going in with boats. I'm a landlubber. When I booked the tour, I chose this company over the one that was a speedboat promising a splash zone. We still got the splash zone.
Mm-hmm.
I won the wet t-shirt contest. I didn't even know there was one.
I'm sure Jimmy enjoyed that.
So until we lost sight of land, it was pretty good. But I found out later that my mom's boyfriend, who went into the cabin to lay down on one of the benches, also got sick, along with about a dozen other people who were sharing a trash can. And that's still preferable to what we're going to talk about today. Oh, and we never saw any dolphins.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I see more dolphins on a typical day at the beach.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to see all my dolphins from here on out, is at the beach and not on a boat.
I hear you.
So while everyone survived our brief 2-hour tour at sea, this is the True Crime Cafe podcast, and not everyone's going to make it to the end of this episode alive, unfortunately.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, little background. Kenneth and Kristy Manzanares were high school sweethearts. She was a real estate agent who also did volunteer work, and every interview just said really good things about her. Like, nobody had a bad thing to say about her. He did various jobs throughout the years. He had a history of playing contact sports, which will come up later, and nobody really said anything bad about him before any of this took place. Kristy's great love in life was being a mother, and her 3 daughters were the lights of her life. And as parents, I know you and I can both relate to that. Like, our kids are everything.
Yes.
The family lived in a quiet, affluent area of Washington County, Utah, and they decided to celebrate their 18th wedding anniversary with an Alaskan cruise. Now, I know you and I talked before about the Alaskan cruise, and I was like, that's on my bucket list.
No longer, right?
It's not on my bucket list. I'm replacing it with a landlubber train cruise or something. Mm-hmm. So while their daughters' ages have little relevance, the news sources gave conflicting info, but most agreed that the youngest was around 13 and the oldest was old enough to have graduated high school, but she wasn't much older than that, like early 20s at the oldest.
Okay.
On July 23rd, 2017, the family boarded the Emerald Princess cruise ship in Seattle. This was a massive boat, and it had 15 decks, several pools, restaurants, casinos, an extensive entertainment program. And it sounds like it was like all-inclusive, which is cool. Mm-hmm. That's how you want your cruise to be, or any kind of vacation.
That's what most cruise ships are like, is my understanding.
Yeah, I will never know. Personally, not just because of this, but the Emerald Princess was carrying 3,400 passengers and 1,100 crew members.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. For reference, that's almost twice the population of the small town where I live. And
wow.
I thought it was a pretty good sized town, but I didn't know a cruise ship could hold that many people.
Mm-hmm.
The husband and wife stayed in a balcony room with a door to an adjoining suite where more relatives were staying. I don't know if their girls were staying with them or if they were staying in one of the adjoining suites. That was never really said. But since it's their anniversary, I know if I was on the anniversary cruise, my kids would not be in the room with, sorry, kids.
Oops, no, she's not.
Not sorry. Very early into the trip, like a day or so after casting off, the ship was in U.S. waters off the southeast coast of Alaska. They docked at Ketchikan, and the family went on a fishing excursion. Now, according to Google, Ketchikan is known for its many Native American totem poles on display throughout town. Nearby Misty Fjords National Monument is a glacier-covered wilderness featuring snow-capped mountains, waterfalls, and salmon-spawning streams. It's also home to rich wildlife, including black bears, wolves, and bald eagles. Thank you, Google. So our families watch some reality TV that takes place in this town, and I can only imagine how breathtaking it is in person, because it's just a beautiful, picturesque town with lots of nature. The family's fellow passengers described them as appearing relaxed, and they were having fun the whole day out. Back on board, sounds like maybe around dinner time, like end of the day, Kenneth starts drinking. And the more he drinks, the more tense things become between him and his wife. As they headed back to their cabin, she was clearly annoyed. And once they were there, she was like, Kenneth, done. Kenneth would later admit to FBI agents that yes, he was drinking heavily, and yes, Kristy was beyond furious. She was so done that she told Kenneth that when the boat docked again, she wanted him to go home to Utah without her, the kids, or the rest of their family. Kenneth would later tell officers, she kept saying, I'm done. We need to figure out a way to get you off the boat. I knew you'd find a way to ruin this trip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right? So although we'll never know whether separation was something she had been considering before this, or simply a reaction to Kenneth spoiling their anniversary cruise by drinking so much, I can't imagine that one night of drinking would get this kind of reaction.
No, not if they'd been together that long.
Yeah.
So no.
It was just a day or two after they boarded, so I can't understand why she'd be that upset about him overindulging so early into the cruise. Like maybe if it was their last night and you're boozing it up before you have to go home.
Mm-hmm.
If my husband did that, I'd be super embarrassed because he is a super silly drunk. Like, and you've met him. So.
Yes.
Yeah. And not cute and like he's giggling a lot and he'll sleep it off later. It's more like, oh crap, we're going to wind up on ridiculousness. But nothing I found said what kind of person Kenneth was when he drank, but by the end of the episode, you'll have some thoughts.
Okay.
2 of the couple's 3 daughters were present in the suite when the couple started to argue. When the topic of divorce came up, Kenneth told them to leave. So they went to the adjoining cabin with their other relatives. He locked the door to prevent them from returning, but it did not prevent them from hearing the rest of the argument. So I've never been on a cruise aside from my little 2-hour tour last week, which was horrible. And I was never in the cabin. So I did some homework. Cruise ship passengers commenting on a webpage on the Fedora's website debated the soundproof quality of a cruise ship room. And it sounds like it depends on what deck you're on.
Okay.
So I'm not giving their room number here in the episode, but it's easy enough to look up. Some news sources did tell which room they were staying in. I looked at the cruise ship map. If I looked correctly, it looks like they were about the middle of the ship with a balcony. So it wasn't on the top level. It wasn't the bottom dollar room. Mm-hmm. And I might get that wrong. And if so, I apologize because, you know me, I get lost trying to get to the town square, which is like 6 blocks from my house. Mm-hmm. So if the show Cruise Ship Killers on Peacock covered this case, I couldn't find it. And I binged some cruise ship killers after my little voyage because I was like just all about ships that, you know, I didn't have to be on. Mm-hmm. But on an unrelated episode, they talked about ship noises and how sound carries well because of the water. People on cruise ships think they hear voices, but it could just be the whirring of a motor echoing through the ship. It makes sense, but her family was right in the next room. And I can't imagine those walls are too thick.
I would think like what I'm picturing, like I've never been on a cruise. I'll never go on a cruise. I have a very irrational fear of water. Like I can swim, but if my feet can't touch bottom, I'm not going in it. So what I'm imagining in my head is like when you're at a hotel and there's people in the room next to you, and if they raise their voice or like if they move the furniture around or whatever, you can kind of hear it.
If the kids are running, it sounds like a herd of elephants.
Yes, that's how I'm picturing this in my head.
Yeah, and I think that does provide a good visual for people who've never been on cruises. And if you have been on a cruise, let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts about the soundproof quality of rooms. Like some people on the Fedora site were like, I could hear this guy snoring every single night. And other people were like, oh, we just left our balcony door cracked and the waves were so soothing and we never heard a thing. And I think it might depend on the, like I said, like the quality of room you have. Mm-hmm. The argument escalated until everyone heard Kristy screaming and begging her husband to stop. Even without being in the room, her family knew that this had turned into a brutal attack. They could just tell by her screams. Unable to return to their parents' suite, the daughters begged their father to stop and let them in from outside the room. I don't know if they were in the hall banging on the door, if they were banging on the wall, but at some point he yelled, "Don't come in here, I mean it." The girls went to the balcony of the room they were in, and they could see through their parents' balcony that their father was straddling their mother and punching her with his fist.
How could they see?
Because the balcony had glass doors, so if they were standing on their balcony, they could see, like, I guess, at an angle into the balcony of the next room.
Okay, but normally you would, I would think that you'd have to, lean over the balcony, and
they may
I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. I couldn't find a lot of detail about it. The poor girls raced to get help, but Kristy's brother, their uncle, who was also on the cruise with them, he climbed over the railing.
Okay.
And went into the balcony on Kenneth and Kristy's room. And he found his sister on the cabin floor, barely alive. And Kenneth only had one thing to say. He said, "She wouldn't stop laughing at me."
It sounds to me like there was a bunch of underlying issues in their marriage before they even went on this cruise.
Agreed. At some point between Kristy's brother getting into the room and security arriving, Kenneth tried to drag Kristy's body toward the balcony. Some people speculate maybe he was going to throw her overboard to kind of hide the evidence.
Well,
But still, it's throwing her balcony.
So at this point, Kristy's brother is in the room?
Yes. It sounded like he climbed over the balcony railing from the family's room to their room.
No, I get that. But if he's in the room, how is Kenneth able to try and drag her body?
So what I found was that Kenneth tried to drag Kristy's body toward the balcony and her brother stopped.
Okay. I'm just saying, I know my brothers well enough to know that if that happened and they were able to get into the room, whoever my spouse or whoever was attacking me would not have the opportunity to try and drag my body anywhere. So anyway.
Hopefully all siblings would be like that.
Well.
We've got stories for
that's a whole different episode.
That's a whole different podcast.
Okay, so he tried to drag her body.
He tried to drag her. The brother stopped them. And the crew was making announcements throughout the ship to request assistance in the couple's room. So the girls got to the crew and told them what was happening. The crew's making announcements throughout the ship to request assistance in the couple's room. But it took a little while for people to respond because while there was an actual event taking place elsewhere on the ship, they were having a murder mystery event.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So one passenger said, "We thought this was part of the dramatic effects they were using for the murder mystery." And then 2 more times they came on and asked for more security and medical teams. But again, it just fit in so well with the murder mystery because it was about a murder on a cruise ship. So really that night, I didn't think anything about it.
I get that. I can understand why they would think that that's part of the murder mystery.
What kind of uncanny coincidence was that?
But was it really a coincidence? I
don't know. Because
Kenneth and Kristy probably knew, because I would assume that when you book a cruise, or at least when you board a cruise, they give you an itinerary to let you know, hey, this is going on at this time on this deck. I would think.
From cruise ships I've seen on these shows, they normally have some kind of dry erase board, and it has, when you go into dinner, it'll have the events elsewhere, we're having this on the whatchamacallit deck.
On the Lido deck. I'm thinking of the Love Boat.
The Lido deck. The Love Boat.
I just aged myself.
This was not the Love Boat by any means. So another passenger told the St. George News that after the announcement from the crew, when she went to check on her kids, one of her family members asked her, "Don't you think that's just part of the play?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, duh." And she said that's kind of what everybody was thinking, that the crew's announcements were part of the fictional murder event. And also, a Princess spokesperson confirmed for People magazine that a music murder trivia game was going on that evening. A different news source said that some of the staff thought the same thing, that they thought that the screams and calls over the loudspeaker were just part of the event. So when security did finally arrive at the room, they found a bloodbath. According to a federal arrest affidavit obtained by People, Kristy was found dead in her cabin. By the time her brother got there and by the time security got there, she had passed.
She had passed.
The affidavit stated that blood was spread throughout the room on multiple surfaces surfaces, including the walls, carpet, and furniture. And his only weapon was his fist. So this is super violent. A different source said that Kenneth was also covered in blood. According to a Utah newspaper online, before security officers arrived in the cabin, Kristy's two brothers and father had arrived on the scene. So in addition to her one brother, her second brother and father had come in. And this one did say that one of the brothers saw Kenneth drag Kristy's body toward the balcony, and he grabbed her ankles and pulled her back into the cabin. So this is just a nightmare. Plain and simple. Despite everyone's efforts to save Kristy, the beating had just been too severe. She suffered multiple skull fractures and died from blunt force trauma to her head and face. Yeah, he just literally punched her to death. And one source said that Kristy had been beaten so severely that she was unrecognizable. After the security team spent 20 minutes trying to save her, she was finally declared dead. So they did like everything in their power.
Yeah.
Her husband was taken into custody on the ship, which most ships do have a little like mini jail kind of thing.
Yeah.
When the ship docked the next day and FBI officers boarded, Kenneth allegedly told them, "My life is over."
That's your concern?
I know. So for any listener who does not know, the reason why it was not the Alaska police was because any time a crime occurs on a ship in U.S. territorial waters, it's the FBI's jurisdiction. So in this case, it was FBI agents out of the Anchorage field office that did the investigation. And cruise ship crimes, I had no idea how commonplace they really were. But I guess when you have like 4,000 plus people on a ship,
I mean, it's basically a city on a ship.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, why there would need to be like security and a little jail and all of that.
That is exactly what Kendall Carver said. Now, Kendall Carver is the chairman of the International Cruise Victims Association, and their daughter disappeared on a cruise ship and still has not been found. And they said the exact same thing. A cruise ship is a floating city with thousands of people serving unlimited drinks with no police. What do you think is going to happen? It's not crime-free, and the passengers need to use common sense.
Agreed.
But when you have that much alcohol flowing, there's not a lot of common sense.
Well, I get that. You would think that at some point cruise ships would be like, okay, we need to basically have like a little police department on the ships. Like, I get that while the ship is on water moving, it's not docked at a port or whatever, that the jurisdiction falls under the FBI. But you would think that they would have a little like on board, almost like a little mini police department.
You would think, but all they have is security teams. And I'm not sure if it's security team who was trained, because I know there are some security jobs where you have like police level training.
Yeah.
But there are some security jobs that are like mall cop. Yeah. I worked airport security in the early 90s, and I've only flown commercially once. And the whole time I was thinking, oh man, I hope their security is better than ours was. So I don't know what level security they had, but the top crimes in no specific order on cruise ships are domestic disputes, especially among honeymooners whose brand new spouse winds up missing or murdered, date rape, missing people who are often assumed to have gone overboard, and people who are kidnapped into sex trafficking. I thought, like, okay, that many people, probably like my small town, it's got a high crime rate, but most of the crimes are like people get their cars broken into. It's a string of thefts, like, vandalism. Well, it's petty crimes.
I can see why domestic violence, I can see why assaults, physical, sexual, whatever, I can see why those would be more common, because if you're on a cruise, there's no like police on board, and you could be going, I mean, like I said, again, I've never been on a cruise, but like you could be 2 days of nothing but just on the water. So who's really going to know?
On the show Cruise Ship Killers, one of the episodes was talking about how when you're in a small space with someone and you don't have the distractions of your phone, the internet, a computer, cable TV, whatever, it forces all the intense emotions to become more intense. So if you have a little squabble before you get on the ship, maybe it'll turn into,
it becomes something big.
Yeah. And if you're, meet someone on the ship and you start a relationship and you have the honeymoon phase, you can focus on each other and it becomes great until you get off the ship and then you get your phone back or your Wi-Fi back or whatever. After the incident, incident, passengers were placed on lockdown for several hours before being allowed to leave the boat. Because of the inconvenience, Princess Cruises offered a $150 onboard credit to each passenger who was on the ship at the time of the incident for a whopping total of about $500,000 in onboard credits. Yeah, I did math. You have thoughts?
I have so many thoughts.
Yeah. So
sorry, your cruise was interrupted by this night of violence that this passenger perpetrated. So to compensate you, we're going to give you a $150 credit to go on another cruise? Yeah, negative. Negative.
I'm guessing onboard credits work for anywhere on the ship.
Yeah, but still.
Nobody wants $150 for the t-shirts in the gift shop.
I'm just trying to figure out, get that you want to compensate the rest of the passengers because this happened. I don't even know. Like, I don't even know how to process that.
When I read this in the first news article, I read it, and then it was in several other ones. But the first time I read it, I said, wow. And my husband's like, what? I said, I cannot wait for Angie's reaction to this.
Yeah. Like, I get it. Like, something horrible happened. They want to compensate the other people on the cruise ship, many of whom thought that this was just part of the show. Yeah. But
and that many people, some of them would not have known if they never got their onboard credits.
Like, it just seems to me like the cruise ship line's focus was on the wrong thing at that particular time. This woman was brutally murdered by her husband, but instead of focusing on that and the trauma that's been caused to their children, like, I'm not even talking about the trauma to her whole family, don't get me wrong, but her children especially, who essentially heard their father murder their mother, they're going to focus on, I just feel like that pisses me off so much that I can't even formulate full sentences right now, Becky.
And I'm sure they offered a statement, but I did not see it in the news articles that I looked at. But after her death, Kristy's family released a statement that said, "We are devastated over the loss of Kristy. She is the light of our lives, a devoted mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Kristy led by example with her giving heart, and we are inspired by the legacy of kindness and optimism she has instilled in her children." Her community loved her so much. It sounded like she was like the quintessential PTA room mom and really involved in her kids' lives, and she helped out. She had other volunteer responsibilities, and I have lots of feelings, and I've got so many feelings that I can't figure out how to get them out. So he pled not guilty. The look on your face right now.
Like, not guilty because, hey, I was of passion. I was momentarily insane. I mean, like,
he initially pled not guilty in a U.S. district court to a first-degree murder charge. But during a plea agreement hearing 3 years later, he pled guilty to second-degree murder, and he remained in federal custody until June 3rd, 2021, when he appeared before a court for sentencing. So he was in jail for 3 years before his plea agreement, and then a little over another year before he got his sentencing.
Okay, so he just outright pled not guilty. It wasn't like not guilty, diminished capacity or something like that. It was just flat out, I'm not guilty.
Yep. His defense lawyer said that the couple's marriage had been long and happy and that the killing had been a tragedy caused by a combination of unfortunate circumstances. They claimed that Kenneth had been left with brain injuries from playing contact sports over the years, including boxing, American football, and wrestling. They also said that he had undiagnosed bipolar disorder and medication that he had taken, including testosterone and amphetamine-like weight loss drugs, and they had been a terrible mix with the alcohol that he consumed. And according to the CBS website, his attorneys asked for a reduced sentence of 7.5 years.
Dylan, you're about to piss me off even more.
The prosecution lawyers claimed the attack was intentional and had been triggered when Kristy told Kenneth she wanted a divorce and demanded he leave the ship. In a rage, he'd attacked her. They argued that he had had anger issues in the past and he had been known to punch walls and would restrain his wife by pushing her shoulders to force her to sit down, something he'd done on the night that he killed her. They described how Kenneth had used his fist as a hammer on his wife's face, saying that it was an unforgivable attack that had been partly witnessed by two of their their children. During the trial, Kenneth broke down and called Kristy his soulmate. So how many years do you think he was sentenced to?
Not enough. I'm going to guess second degree murder, federal level, like 10?
30 years.
How many?
30.
Still not enough, but okay.
No, it's not. Better than 7.5.
Yeah.
Acting U.S. Attorney Brian Wilson of the District of Alaska said in a press release from the U.S. Department of Justice, this was not a random act of violence, but a chilling neglect for human life for which he will serve 30 years in federal prison where there is no parole ever. No excuse can justify the savagery committed by this man who will now spend the next 3 decades behind bars.
I'm just saying, it's still not enough.
No. After sentencing, Kristy's family released a statement saying that the ruling brought them neither joy nor anger, but simply a sense of resolution. And it went on to say, while this marks the end of another chapter of this unimaginable ordeal, the fact is that Kristy's 3 girls are still without both of their parents, and our focus now is to support them as best we can. Because remember, the one was just 13 when it happened. 4 years later, she's only 17.
Oh,
and that was just last year.
Those poor kids.
I cannot imagine.
Those poor kids.
I have lost a parent, and I know what that feels like, but I can't imagine losing one parent to the other parent and then the other parent going to jail for 30 years.
30 years is not enough. Like, yeah, I don't think it was first degree murder because I don't think it was premeditated. Okay. But I mean, it could have been. It could have been if they were already having issues and he knew they were going on this cruise and it just provided the perfect cover or whatever. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think that it was premeditated. So I don't think a first degree murder charge was the right one.
Okay. Ready for the plot twist?
Yeah.
Wait, there's more. After a month into his sentencing, the Alaska Department of Corrections issued a release stating that Kenneth was observed to be unresponsive in his cell at 6:59 a.m. Correctional officers and medical staff responded immediately and began performing life-saving measures until emergency responders arrived on the scene at 7:14 a.m. and he was pronounced dead at 7:42 a.m.
Did he kill himself or...
Inmates' health records are confidential. All reports I have found say that there was no evidence of foul play and that it was not linked to COVID-19. Kenneth was being held here and was in the process of being moved to a federal institution. So he was still being held in Alaska.
Okay.
I would assume that maybe he took his own life. If it wasn't foul play and it wasn't COVID, that's one of the only things left.
I mean, unless he had some undiagnosed, I don't know. I mean, it could have been any number of things. I wish we knew for
that
sure.
level of stress. It could be a heart attack. It could be anything.
I mean, it could be, he could have had a heart attack or a brain aneurysm or something. I don't know. I wish they would have been able to tell us.
It is sad that the girls are now orphans.
They are. And that is very sad.
That is the real tragedy. Now they have to spend the rest of their life without either parent.
Me personally, if one of my parents was killed by the other parent, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with the remaining parent. So I would just automatically consider myself an orphan anyway. But that's just me personally, and everybody's different. I do feel horrible for their daughters, because at least 2 of them basically heard their mother being murdered by their father. And to know that, even though he was sentenced to 30 years, he would have been in jail. They wouldn't have been able, it's not like they could have picked up the phone and said, hey, Dad, I'm coming over. But at least they would have had the opportunity, if they chose to, at some point, to have whatever type of relationship they could still have with him.
Right.
But if he killed himself, he took the coward's way out.
I agree.
Yeah, I was fully expecting you to tell me that it was overturned and he was released, and I was fully prepared to be mad.
Nope.
But no, I did not know that if you're on a cruise ship that it falls under federal jurisdiction. I guess it makes sense.
As long as it's in U.S. waters.
Well, yeah. It makes sense to me that it would, because you can't really give states jurisdiction over water because you can't draw boundary lines there. But I don't know. I learned a lot from this episode. I'm very angry.
My brain has the dome. I'm always a little impressed with myself when I can teach you something about law.
Why?
Because you're the one with the degrees and all the knowledge.
I have degrees, but I'm not a lawyer. Like, my degrees are in criminal justice.
Right.
I know some law stuff, but...
Yeah, but I'm the one over here, I just know how to get our traffic tickets. I just know common law. And when by common, I mean like West Virginia hillbilly common law, because that's where I grew up.
I'm not laughing at you, but I am laughing at you just because of the way you phrase stuff.
Yeah. Stay caffeinated.
And join us next time for another cup of crime.